Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining us today. This is the second webinar of the Inspire series. I'm Sonia Busso. I work at the University of Birmingham, and I'm the scientific coordinator of the Inspire project. This is a project funded by Horizon Europe to strengthen democracy by co-creating spaces of participation with groups that are often marginalized in policymaking, and by exploring more creative and arts-based methods to center their voice and influence in policy change, and also to strengthen democratic capabilities, not only of the participants, but also, as we're finding, more and more of the policymakers and everyone involved. So today we're focusing on one of the 7 participatory processes implemented under Inspire across various European countries. So the process we're going to talk about today uses legislative theatre to work with young people in the West Midlands in the UK to improve youth employment policies. And we led on this project from the University of Birmingham in partnership with the Young Combined Authority, which is a youth advisory body to the West Midlands Combined Authority, and with the youth organization Youth Focus West Midlands. And I'm delighted to host today Sam Dixen and Lee Grant, the 2 legislative theatre facilitators that guided the young people over several months to help them develop their own play on their own experience of accessing career services and work opportunities. And Sam and Lee also facilitated the events with audiences of community members and teams of policymakers. And they're going to tell us about his experience in a minute. In a few minutes, because I've got a surprise for everyone. And Katie Rubin also joins us today. She's the driver of the rise of popularity of legislative theatre in the UK, the US, and beyond. And she leads on a number of legislative theatre projects and training workshops as well. And she has been Sam and Lee's mentor as part of the Inspire project. And so with these fantastic collaborators and guests today, we're going to learn more about what we did in the West Midlands, how we use legislative theatre with a group of diverse young people, and what we're achieving and what the challenges are. And Ebba, he's here from one of the consortium partners, Ipsos, who are organizing this webinar series. And she will monitor the chat, so do write your comments, questions throughout. So before we kick off, I said I had a surprise for you. So we're sharing our film preview. It's a very short film, but it gives you a good overview of what the project is about and how legislative theatre work. And it's also an opportunity to hear from the young people themselves. So let me share this short video.
We are at the amazing University of Birmingham's own Department of Theatre. So today we've got our Inspire Legislative Theatre performance and forum.
So the performance is around young people's experience in employment and apprenticeships, and basically just the youth experience. It has a cast of 14 to 17, and it's about their lived experiences in education to the real world of work and the caveats, pitfalls and problems surrounding all of that.
We're inviting policymakers to the performance, so we're just trying to make a change.
So the Inspire project is a 3-year project, and it involves 17 partners across Europe. The aim of the project is strengthening democracy and make it genuinely inclusive. And we think we can only do that if we start from the experience of groups that tend to be marginalized in policymaking. So we're organizing a series of participatory processes using arts-based methods and creative approaches. And in the West Midlands, we're working with 15 young people from diverse backgrounds.
The cast have joined the project because they have a lived experience of problems and issues with youth employment.
We're going to be really thinking about how to make more equitable work opportunities, workplace apprenticeships and work experience. Legislative theatre is a creative participatory democracy methodology that's fun and inclusive and really a hands-on way for community members, policymakers, neighbors, families, anybody impacted by an issue to come together, understand deeply deeply how a problem is affecting people in the community, and then actually test out and propose, deliberate and vote on proposals for change.
It always starts with just play, fun and games. And what we do is we use those as like mechanisms to slowly delve into the more personal.
It's very creative and it really centers the experience of the participants.
It involves so much laughter and joy, which then through the debriefs that Lee and I lead, that's kind of where the pennies drop and the connections are made between this game that we're playing in the space and the issues that we're facing in real life.
The piece is all about the realities of youth employment, so we're trying to get the message about how unfair youth employment is in the UK and the local area. So we are obviously trying to create a change for what young people are facing in terms of the workplace.
Which has been identified as a really important issue by the West Midlands Youth Combined Authority.
But it's all come along without us even noticing.
We just built it up from the ground. All the scenes, like, we've just made ourselves, like, and we made them from the start. It was just came from like tiny ideas, and then we just built them up and perfected them into the scenes that they are now.
And then boom, we had the play and we started to piece it all together, and now here we are, and it's going to be amazing.
We weren't given a script, we weren't given like, you do this, you do that. It was everything was based upon us, our views, especially as young people. Like anything we thought, any ideas we had, anything we've been through in life, anything that we've been through, we kind of just implemented it into this, and we developed it the whole time.
And we all just sort of just work together, and then it just builds into something just great. Like, it's crazy how quick it happened, from like something so small into now a whole play.
The play is just the beginning, because during the performance you have an audience of what we call the spect actors, because they are very active, they interact with the scenes.
Like you're a spectator and also an actor, it's quite involved, and that underpins how legislative theatre works as a tool for policy making. Everybody in the room, actors, audience, everybody is all involved in this co-creation method to create something for change.
The audience is going to talk about the problems that they saw, identify how those relate to the rest of the community, how they relate to policy problems and barriers in the West Midlands.
Okay, so what do you want?
Just jobs near me.
Where's your location?
Birmingham.
Okay, so we've got a job for a Taco Bell in Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah.
Okay, can we search for some job applications? Okay?
Oh, we've got an email.
Yeah? Okay, let's open it. Alright.
Rejected.
Oh, damn.
Did you guys see any problems in the play? Okay, a nice little spread. Okay, people have saw some problems. What were they? Yes.
Putting everybody in a box and a category, it's very judgmental.
Okay, so what's really cool about this process is that these problems are things that all of these young people have raised.
And then they're actually invited to come up on stage and test out new ideas.
They get to raise their hand, be really brave, and volunteer themselves to act on stage, and they will propose and act their policy change on stage through improvisation with our cast.
The idea is that they see the problems identified by the young people, and by entering the play, they try to co-create possible solutions with the young people.
And from that, they will have like policies that could evolve from it, policies could change from it, and it's just like seeing how that would present itself.
Our job is, as the actors, is to like just take in what the audience is saying, like what their ideas are, and to try and add them into the play, but also show them that this might not work, how it might not work, and how it might work, and how you can tweak it.
And the idea then is that once we have those pushbacks added in and we really get into the nitty-gritty of forum theatre, it triggers something in them where they realise, okay, we've got these ideas, but they need to be refined more so we can turn them into policy.
How would these changes be able to be implemented? How do we need to negotiate them further to make sure they work for the community so that we're not both identifying problems separate from the people who are experiencing them, and we're not coming up with solutions away from the people who are experiencing them?
Actually, I think it helps them understand more where the issues lie and why certain things that they might have recommended might not work, or why they've not been implemented.
And those improvisations are then material material for everyone in the audience, the young people and the audience and the policymakers, to work together on a slate of policy proposals that ideally will really speak to the lived experience of the young people and will really be things that can be actioned and implemented across the West Midlands in the near future.
In the room we'll have a team of policymakers from the West Midlands Combined Authority that can help us translate these ideas into actual change.
There's a big debate and then everybody votes on what policies they think should be prioritised by the policymakers.
My commitment is ensuring continued youth engagement to shape and influence not only the West Midlands Combined Authority, so the West Midlands Mayor has created a youth plan, so making sure that there's youth engagement and the insights that have come through tonight, but also making sure that there's continued youth engagement in shaping the youth unemployment commitments that we're making as a combined authority, making sure young people's voices are in that, so hoping to do as much of that as possible by July 2025.
I think it's making a difference in such a great way, because I think the arts is available to everyone.
I think it's really important because you can show so much through a play. It helps change people's perspectives on things.
Because it can express the different issues in youth employment.
Yeah, I would say it's very engaging and creative, and people are actually more entertained and interested, and they're more likely to care about these issues if we present them in this creative way.
It puts it in such a direct way. It's not just lecturing to you about what's happening.
If you put yourself into someone's shoe, you'll realise how hard it actually is. So that's technically the whole point of it. To make them see how we perceive things, how hard it is for us to actually do stuff.
Because it's theatre that creates change. It's not just about problems, it changes problems.
That was really cool. That was really cool. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know how that would look, but actually getting the audience members up and that participation was actually really clever.
And it was a really great way of hitting those taboo subjects in a way that is accessible, appropriate and also actually enjoyable, which is not often the case.
I think that we need to do more of it. It feels like scope to do the same thing in lots of different ways to meet a lot of different young people's needs.
They have such strong voices, and it feels like this process, I hope, has helped them feel like that can be listened to and actually acted upon, because without their voice in this project, these changes just wouldn't have happened. It just wouldn't have happened without their voice.
I think it's a fun way to create a change. Yeah.
Great. So we're really proud of this film, and I think it does a great job conveying the experience of the young people themselves, but also I think Sam and Lee did a fantastic job at sharing what they did. And I just want to go straight to you, Sam and Lee. If you want to tell us a bit about this experience of leading this project with such young people. It's a really young group. They're between 14 and 17. Some of them are turning 18 now. But so how did it work, and how legislative theatre helped you to develop this, to contribute to this change that we're now working with policymakers as well?
Yes, thank you, Sonia, and hello everyone. I'll just do a quick introduction. I'm Sam. I'm one of the co-lead facilitators of the Inspire Legislative Theatre project. And wait, Lee, you introduce yourself too.
Yeah. Hi guys. Firstly, everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Hello everyone, I am Lee. I'm one of the co-facilitators, co-lead facilitators on this project, the Inspire project. And yeah, we're just gonna, as Sonia alluded to, we're gonna tell you a bit about how it was in terms of the experience for us and working with the young people. I guess I'll just kick off by saying it was a very enriching process, seeing all these young people from various sections of the West Midlands coming together and being able to create something that's so personal and so real that is then used to as a springboard to then help create change. It's been very eye-opening that even if you don't have the experience on stage, you can still come together as a group of people who have a passion to make a difference, to make something that is not only emotive, but also without no pun intended, inspiring to like policymakers and other people to realize that, oh wait, no, there is a problem in the West Midlands. There is changes that need to be made, and this play, I believe, has been like a nice catalyst for that.
Yeah, 100%. It's been we worked with 15 young people from all across the West Midlands. All different cities and towns were represented. And I think like one thing that I think really impacted the young people, as well as the process itself, which we will get into, is that they all share a very similar experience, despite being having different local councils represent their area. Like they all have this shared collective experience of poor careers education, not much access to work experience, all of these things. And as well as them having that shared experience, they kind of just built a really nice community, and like with lots of solidarity between them, like despite the age differences and the area differences, which was really lovely. We had a session with them yesterday, and a lot of their feedback has been about how confident they now feel about raising issues, also identifying them. I think at the start of the process they did really struggle. A few of them really struggled to pinpoint what is wrong with this, like this just normal not having had access to work experience, whereas like now a lot of them at the end of it really feel like they can identify problems, point them out, and a few of them have started to go into different pathways to continue policy work. We've got someone going into youth parliament as a result, and like it's really exciting stuff. So yeah, it feels like it has been transformational for the young people, as well as hopefully on the policy side as well.
Yeah. Would you like to add anything else? I know that you want to perhaps share a game with the audience to just give them a sense of what legislative theatre is about. Do you still want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of cameras off, so I don't want to disturb anyone's camera off quiet time. But if as many people as possible could very briefly put your camera on for about 2 minutes, that'd be really great. Oh, thank you. Amazing. It's good to
That's a
see
good
you all.
excuse
Thank
to see
you.
people's faces.
Exactly, yeah. We won't be, don't worry. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to do something really, really simple. A lot of obviously it's a creative way of policy making, and so we take a lot of different games and approaches to doing that, to create the scenes that highlight all the problems that they faced. We're not going to do that, but what I'm going to ask you to do is have a think about how you feel about democracy and policy making. So have a quick think about how you feel about that. And what I'm going to ask you to do is make an image in your little rectangle with your body, with your face, arms, hands, anything. Make an image of how that feels. And there's no right or wrong. It is literally just an image of how that feels. So how does democracy and policy making feel to you? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think. Think about that, okay? Seeing some thinking faces.
Shall we do the 3, 2 action?
Okay, I'm going to count down and we're all going to do them. So 3, 2,
1, action!
Ah, interesting. Okay, have a look at the screen and see what other ones people are doing. Interesting. Okay, a lot of unhappy faces. A lot of
hair pulling as well. A lot of just. I mean, there is some positive though. There's some like yay and like cheering. That's nice to see.
We can shake that off. I won't let you stay there. Okay, interesting. We all have different experiences of democracy. That's what that's telling me. And that's kind of the approach that we take going into the rehearsal room. Everyone is coming into the process with different levels of confidence in, like I said, identifying problems and voicing them. All those different things, different experiences of the systems. One school had really good careers education, one school had really bad careers education. And what legislative theatre does, I think, really well is highlight all of those things.
Great.
And I guess just to add on to that as well, like Sam was saying, it's about people from different walks of life or different areas coming together and tackling this thing of democracy, this big scary thing, I suppose. But like you just saw there, one of the things we like use to access that, I suppose, or jump into democracy is using games, is having fun, playing. It's one of, I guess, the big things that underpins this creative process. Having fun whilst also delving into serious topics to try and to make change.
Yeah, and I think it's the fun, joy, the games that also challenge certain power dynamics. And the young people yesterday were saying that they felt much more comfortable speaking up to the policymakers while they were on their stage, right, trying to interact with their play. And then they felt actually emboldened to then in the follow-up meeting to ask questions and to ask amendments about the policy ideas. And so I think this element is quite important to change hierarchies of power and expertise. And I think Katie, you introduced us all to legislative theatre, and it'd be nice to hear from you a bit of a sort of a broader perspective of what's happening, because there's legislative theatre projects happening everywhere in the UK, and there's also ideas about embedding it in some sort of national level charity-led anti-poverty strategies. So I don't know if you want to give us a bit of background about legislative theatre and what do you think really works about this approach to participatory democracy?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sonia. First of all, I think maybe lots of people know here, but maybe some of us don't, right? We're talking about a process that comes out of the theater of the oppressed, which started in Brazil in the 1960s, started by an activist and theater maker named Augusto Boal and his comrades and colleagues. And then this practice of kind of theater as a problem posing and dialogue starting tool led to other kind of branches that we say of the tree of theater of the oppressed. So invisible theater to kind of shake up and disrupt spaces, or kind of techniques that are more about internalized oppression. And then kind of accidentally, Gustavo Boal became a city council member in Rio in the early 1990s and started thinking, oh, wait a minute, we could also use this process, as Sam and Lee have said, of kind of bringing this sense of playfulness, but also really starting from the stories and the experiences of people living the problems as the way to frame a policy question, right? We know that policymakers start with a problem or a question, and then they slap on a solution usually. So we're saying we want to interrupt that process at two levels. And that was the origin of legislative theater in Rio in the city council in the early 1990s. Was to say people who are experiencing these problems. So in this process, young people who are experiencing lack of employment opportunities, work experience, careers, education in the West Midlands, should be framing the problem from their experience. And we need to make sure we have a shared understanding of how that problem really impacts people. And that's where the play is so important. So it's not random that we're using theater. And we totally understand that it sounds weird to use theater to make policy, but it's actually really important as a way to make sure that all the stakeholders involved actually deeply understand the nuance of how the existing policies and structures and designs are impacting people's daily lives. But framing the problem from the experience of people who are living it is not the only way is not the only thing we're doing, right? That's kind of arts for narrative shift, and that's important. But this goes beyond that. This says also, can we use theater as a way to test out policy solutions so that we're not just slapping on a solution that comes from somebody who sits in city council but maybe isn't experiencing these problems on the day-to-day? We're actually saying young people, their neighbors, their peers, their teachers, also policymakers who are also neighbors and peers because they also live in that place. They also might have their own young people. They also were young people once. So we're imagining, what if everyone is a policymaker, just like everyone is a citizen and everyone is an actor? And that's the origin of of legislative theater, coming out of this practice of theater of the oppressed. And then it has spread around the world. So as Sonia said, there's lots of legislative theater happening in the UK, but also in other parts of Europe, in parts of Africa, in South America, in North America, even in places where democracy is struggling, like lots of those places, and particularly North America. There is legislative theater, along with all this ecosystem of participatory democracy that many of us work in, right? So I think what's exciting for us, all of us working on this project, is how does legislative theater, prioritizing, as Sam and Lee have said, fun, joyfulness, creativity, grassroots knowledge, right? Hands-on practice. How do these amplify and complement what's also happening with participatory budgeting or citizens' assemblies or digital platforms? How do we say, okay, sometimes we might just not need to keep sitting around and hearing expert advice from other people. We need to do that at some points, and we also need to prioritize a lived experience and make sure we're understanding in an embodied and emotional way, right? Or how can a legislative theater process help us understand what the problems are and get to some ideas which could then lead to a participatory budgeting process? So all these things are kind of part of an ecosystem that can work together. And the last thing I'll say is that it's really important in this process, and I would argue that it should be important to all of us thinking about participatory democracy, if we say that everyone is an actor and everyone is a citizen because we live in the world and therefore we're experts on our experience. And everyone can be an actor because we take action. And everyone can be a policymaker because we then know what needs to happen in our lives to make it better. Then also everyone needs to be able to be a facilitator or a leader of these processes. And everyone can be. And I think we hold that space too exclusively sometimes in terms of who gets to lead these kinds of processes. And for sure, it's a very important skill to make sure that these spaces are held, that they're equitable, that they're joyful, that we feel the momentum, that we get to outputs. These are all things, and they're tricky and they take time, particularly with all the mess of democracy. But that's been a really important part of the ethics of legislative theater, this idea of multiplication. In fact, on that tree that I referenced before that we sometimes refer to in the theater of the oppressed, there's a bird of multiplication saying that anybody who's learning this stuff can go on and do it in the future. And so that's been a really important part of this process. Lee and Sam have been participating in legislative theater and then leading it along the last few years in various processes around youth mental health, around public safety for women and girls in transport and public spaces in Manchester, where all three of us are based. And so this project is really continuing that. And I then didn't go to a lot of rehearsals at all and just kind of really help behind the scenes. So we actually did days of practice ourselves where we got to just be in a safe space to practice, to test, to get feedback, and then weekly calls to check in between every rehearsal, to look at the plan, to talk about what's happening, to troubleshoot, that kind of thing. And that, I think, is, from my perspective, and Lee and Sam can talk about that too, but has been such a fun part of this process and really joyful. And now, there's lots more legislative theater popping up around the UK and people looking for more practitioners and people with experience working on different issues or working in different parts of the UK. And so it's really important to us to say that can be people who have gone through this process and said, wait a minute, this is a great way, just like you're saying, those actors have said. And we can see actors in the Birmingham project who would probably also be great facilitators in the future, right? So every time some people say, ooh, this is so exciting to me, this is how I really want to help make change, then we need those structures, the infrastructure, the resources, the time, the money to support them to become the next practitioners. And that's part of the ethics and the politics of what we're doing. So that's been a really important part of this project. So I'll stop it there for now.
Yeah, that's great. And I think now that we gave you a bit of an overview, it's good to hear from you and have a conversation with everyone in the audience. There was already a question in the chat. Nicola, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and show your question and maybe add a bit more on that, or I can also read your question on your behalf.
Yeah, I'm not sure how noisy it might be.
No,
I
go
just was
ahead.
interested in knowing more about how you chose who to invite to be part of the spectators group.
Yes. So the audience should be audiences of community members, but we had two events with this project, right? And two very different audiences, different experiences of, particularly for Sam and Lee, of facilitating and connecting with that audience. I don't know if you want to share your reflection on this, but we used our networks, our local networks, to bring in people from the community through the actors, so their friends and family, through the policymakers we also work with, to the youth groups that we work with, and so we used our networks to bring in people as spectators. But then, audiences are different, and then with each different audience, you have a completely different event. So yeah, it would be good to hear Sam and Lee's reflection on this as they facilitated both these encounters.
Yeah. So it was a public event, so that anyone could sign up on Eventbrite. So yeah, the audiences were made up of community members, friends, family, neighbours of the cast, policymakers' friends, colleagues, things like that. So like a good mix of experience and wisdom in the room, which was really key. And in terms of who are the spectators that are invited onto the stage, that's entirely who's brave enough to raise their hand, essentially. So after we see the play, we discuss the problems with the audience. Then we ask the audience to turn to their neighbour to quickly brainstorm like a solution to one of the problems that they saw in the play. And then we ask the people in the audience if they feel confident enough to raise their hand to come onto the stage and put this solution into the play in real time with the actors. So it really just depends on who is feeling really brave to raise their hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Lee wants to add something.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what Sam was saying there, the spectators are people who just are brave enough to come on stage and have their ideas means tested. But the reason we do that is because we want to show the audience that you guys have made, or individuals have made some great ideas, but they need work. Like, you saw how the idea worked, but you also saw the resistance, the blocking, or the blockers rather, the backlash. So it's through these interventions that we have with the audience on stage that we get the audience thinking, okay, so this idea was presented, but this was the reaction. So how can we then change or alter that to make it better? And it's through doing these interventions repeatedly, it then comes to the more policy side of the event, in which the entire audience is then, I say invited, asked to turn to their neighbours and create a policy based off the play and based off the interventions that they saw, or I say the interventions that they saw, the idea that if you could change something, what would you want to change? And it's through, I guess, that collective brain, if you like, that we then create the policy proposals that come from the event, in which everybody's individual policy is gathered up and organized into various sections, whether it's specifically to do with government or local council or work experience or schools, whichever it may be. And then it's up to the policy team to then summarize that in each of their categories and create a succinct basic proposal, which we will then work on later on in the event.
Yes, and like my impression is that sometimes if in the audience there are more young people or more community members, then very concrete actions often develop through the interaction with the young actors and the policymakers and sometimes when there are more policymakers in the audience or then it becomes more high level and so yeah it just leads to then different proposals that tend perhaps more towards long-term processes rather than concrete short-term actions. So I think that makes a big difference. I don't know if Katie you want to comment on this giving some perspective since you've done several different projects with different audiences and policymakers.
Yeah, I would just say a couple things that we like. I mean, I think it's important for the audience for all of us to think about that policy change takes time. And so we say that these processes are going to be messy. On the other hand, we are putting the policymakers and anyone else who has any influence on the spot and saying, what can you do quickly? And sometimes those small wins are really valuable because they give us that motivation and energy to keep going, and they help everyone there see the value of their work. So sometimes we like to think about proposals in terms of long-term and short-term. Like immediately we're going to do this, and over the long term, or the big vision is that it could get to here, right? And we've seen councils across the UK and national government too be able to do kind of changes in their bureaucratic process in a week that massively meant that people could get quicker support in terms of homelessness and housing access. That like cut your waiting time by hours. And so this is not a huge change in, financialization of housing or, homelessness, infrastructure and poverty, but it's a massive change in terms of how long you have to wait to get emergency housing. And so both of those kinds of things are important. And what we want to show and work on through the process is that people can hold both of those things at the same time, and that we value what's tangible and we think about our sort of big dreams. Yeah.
I agree. And what we're trying to do is to encourage policymakers to think in the short and long term, is to propose some milestones, right? And some key actions that can lead towards the implementation of the proposals. And then we, thanks to the Platonic team, who is another partner in their consortium, we have this space online where we have a policy tracker to monitor progress. And we're really trying to engage the policymakers as well as the young people in the community in taking ownership of this process. And because I think there are a lot of really well-meaning policymakers, but you sometimes get lost in the messiness of policymaking. And I think it's good to also offer them some tools to help them monitor progress and, check each other, call each other in, right, in order to make sure that the change actually happens. So there is another great question in the chat from Lieden. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. They're asking how much preparation is involved with the young actors, how many weeks of rehearsal are involved. I think it depends on what you want to do and who you're involved in. In our case, it was several months. I don't know, Sam and Lee, if you want to answer here. Yeah.
Yeah, in our case, which was with a cast of 15, we rehearsed once a week, every Saturday for how many weeks? From start of February till end of March, start of April. So quite a few weeks, I think 8 or 9 weeks roughly.
Yeah, about 9 weeks, yeah.
9 weeks, so about 9 sessions in total. But like there are so many different scopes to how big or small these processes can be. You can have processes that could take, you could do a process in a week. You could do a process in 2 months or 6 months. Like there's kind of no, I would say, no necessary limit to it. But Katie might have some more useful input on that.
Yeah, absolutely what Sam said. I mean, it's all about sort of that people feel like they've built a community and that they can identify those problems. And sometimes you have a community that's already built and is already identifying those problems, right? You have a group at work who's talking every day about the structural problems you have in that institution. So you could work in 3 hours and create a play because they've already a sense of solidarity and there's already a lot of understanding of the problems. And maybe all we need to do is communicate them in a different way that we can use to invite people in. So, and then we're starting from scratch in this project, we really want to, part of the goal is to build a sense of community. So you want to take more time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was very important for these young people that are never met each other to feel like a group. And the amazing facilitation from Sam and Lee really achieved that. And there is now this sense of solidarity. They really support each other and they love meeting in person and connecting. I think that's been one of the biggest achievements of this project. But we did recently one in Manchester, a mini legislative theatre in 3 days, and it was equally fun. And we came up with 3 sound proposals as well, right? And that was about strengthening implementation of participatory decisions, right? And what are the barriers? So yeah, there's it's a different way of using it. So there is another great question in the chat. I understand that Vanessa can't turn camera on. Vanessa is also a partner in Inspire. Policymakers have to convince others that have not been part of the process, officials, policymakers in council, in making policy and policy change. So what have been the challenges in communicating it forward from policymakers that have attended? Yes, that's a very good question. So I think even the policymakers that attend sometimes, it's a very different approach. I think most policymakers don't necessarily know how to do participation. They want to, but it's a learning process there as well, right? And so it's about building their democratic capabilities as well. And sometimes they do participate, but they don't really know what's expected beyond actually participating. And so I think one of the challenges of legislative theatre is that we ask people to commit very visibly in front of an audience, and then we follow up with them. So we continue to chase them, and it's not just a series of recommendations that are left there. And this again requires some learning and some adapting, and sometimes it's even difficult to communicate in a way that is accessible. And so sometimes they have good ideas, but they use too many words. And I think that's my problem as well. So there's always this translation process, right? That is happening. It's a learning for all of us. But I think what is happening in this last project we did is that the policymakers we invited other policymakers to the follow-up, right? And so they're sort of extended teams. Policymakers that were in the audience and not actually in the policy team are now taking more of a lead in driving certain actions. And so there is this sort of spillover effect. And we just have to be I suppose, able to navigate the policy environment sometimes and identify more allies along the way. I'd be good to hear Sam and Lee and Katie's take on this as well.
Sam, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think kind of just from the processes I've worked on, something that you might hear a lot is like a policymaker on the panel might make a commitment, a proposal, and with commitments on the day, and then when it comes to the follow-up or the chasing of them in the weeks and months following it, sometimes, not always, there is often concrete change that comes from it, but sometimes you hear that they said that they did their commitment, which was that they were going to ask their boss about a budget review. Step one, ask the boss if that is what their commitment was, and sometimes that is where we can be hit with they said no, or like they did this. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be like a bit tricky to navigate some at times because, like Katie said earlier, we're aware that like policy change does take time. It's not something that can happen overnight. But equally, we we kind of in an ideal world would like the commitments made by the policymakers to be something that they can follow through with and that are like quite impactful. Like rather than, for example, using Sam's what she said there, rather than like, oh, my commitment was I spoke to my boss about a budget review. It could be something like, so I put together this budget review, I've pushed it forward to my boss and other people and my extended network. Just something that's a bit more, I guess, concrete and also trackable. So then if we come back to them and say, hey, how has this been going? We can get like a solid answer of, oh yeah, okay, so I've sent it to these people have responded with this, rather than I've told the powers that be and I haven't got a response yet. I've gotten like a flat out no. Unfortunately, it seems that sometimes in this process, we ideally would love like a nice balance of like passion and power in terms of like policymakers, because it seems like obviously sometimes you have policymakers who are extremely passionate about it, but sometimes they're hamstrung by like the power that they have, or vice versa. So it can be difficult sometimes. Well, it's something we do manage though.
And I would jump in and add that to me, it has everything to do with the design and the initiation of the project. So we've had great success where a council or a part of national government has asked for this process. They've commissioned it because they saw other councils or governments doing it. And then the mayor is there, the council lead is there, all the team of the bureaucracy is there. They've made sure their whole team is there because they have a mandate to create a strategy through this process, and they've invested in it and they've paid for it, and their butts are on the line. And I think that this is really key in the design. And this is something, and we all talk about this, that is a little bit tricky about these processes that are funded externally, and that maybe there's also, I wonder about the relationship between councils and research and universities. It can kind of challenge this dynamic in terms of who they think is responsible. And I think that it's really key that they should not be looking at me, nor Sam, nor Lee, nor Sonia, as we are the ones to chase up the outputs. We don't work there. We're not their bosses. They're not responsible to us. They're responsible to each other and to their citizens. And so that is key. And so if that in Medway Council, they did every single thing, and there were about 6 different commitments out of the proposals, massive changes. They created a Medway, one of the first council-run lettings agencies, for the council to have their own estate agency to take out private estate agents, so that estate agents could be helping to prevent evictions and helping to negotiate with landlords. Massive changes, right? Kensington and Chelsea has done everything from small changes to big changes. They created a new triage system in their frontline services so that people know immediately how urgent, or what's the urgency of people's needs. So these are the kinds of things that have happened, and things are happening in these processes too, but there is very much, I would say, when you think about participatory democracy, it's the design of the front end that is key in my experience, and who's on the line. Who's on the line? That's what I would say.
That is true. I think Katie and I always have this discussion. We know many projects commissioned by state institutions that still never go beyond the process itself. But in this case, that's true that we had funding from external funders, but actually the partnership happened at the start, so before the application, the bids. So the partners, the state agencies, where the institutions were part of the partnerships, and so this project actually fit into their participatory agenda on youth employment. could it depend also on different policy focus and whether it's easier to implement certain policy than others? I think this is a long-term discussion. There's also more related question from Nicola, for instance. Do you think there's particular topic groups that this method is most impactful for? And I think Lucy's question was partly answered by the discussion before on design and embedding.
I can just chime in one
Yeah.
thing on Lucy's question, just very quickly,
Yeah.
is that in some processes we're doing around the UK, not necessarily in this one, although we are funding follow-up meetings with the young people, but in some processes where we're creating a year-long infrastructure, what we call a scrutiny committee that meets quarterly, using theatrical tools as well as kind of updates and meeting structure with the actors and all the policymakers involved, and that those are scheduled at the beginning of the project, that the actors are paid to be at all of them. They're facilitated by the external facilitators, but the council or the leadership that is committed to making that strategy or policy platform has to be at all those meetings. And again, we've seen really good success with that model when it's planned in advance, when it's budgeted in, and that it's quarterly over a year, and that there's a process of updating the rest of the public after each of those meetings so that everyone knows transparently how that's worked. So for example, in Medway, that connected to the homelessness forum that met quarterly. So the homelessness forum got an update on the scrutiny committee meeting of the legislative theater. And then at the end, they were able to say, here's our strategy. And all the proposals that came from this process are articulated. The ones that came from this process are noted in the strategy so that people see their input recognized in the policy and the budget going forward.
I think that's a very good design, and thinking ahead about follow-up and embeddedness is crucial. For this project, we are now planning the youth-led evaluation programs and a series of initiatives to continue the work and embed it in the youth employment strategy. But of course, and we'll continue to monitor it, but we'll see how that develops. We don't know yet, but it's promising at least. So there is another question here. Do you know if it's embedded anywhere in schools for decision making? This is a good question. I don't know if Katie knows about this. On what students want to, but there in their community. Yeah, so the embedding it, so not just and then mention also opportunity for decision making in sport, local clubs, events. I think Katie has been involved in a really interesting process involving in Sports England. Yeah. I don't know about any cases of embedding approaches like this in schools, but I think we're thinking more and more about this democratic pedagogy. I don't know, Katie, if you know of anything.
No, I'll say really briefly, there's a legislative theater project happening with the Department for Education right now about the rights of students in relation to their work with tech and AI in education. That is feeding into the government's copyright legislation. The Department for Education has actually gotten the government to hold a section of the copyright legislation blank for the input, like hold it for the input of this legislative theater process. And it's working with teenagers in school, but it's not embedded. And so we would love to see that. It's just this one project. But again, it's very, very concrete how it's going to lead to policy outputs, which is amazing. And like they've got, again, the Department of Education is paying for it and asked for it. So they're all showing up and they're super nervous, which is great. That's when they also show up when they're super nervous. But then the Sport England on the national level, also they're an arm's length government body, has commissioned a national legislative theater series. So in a way embedded, not embedded, but ongoing, because it's been across four different regions, thinking about what are barriers to access and talent pathways around race, ability, class, financial barriers, etc., in kind of professional sport, but working with schools, active partnerships, which are kind of nonprofits that are supporting activity, and the national governing boards of sport, like football and basketball and all these things. And they're actually now interested in extending that and doing 4 more regions of the UK because they've seen how valuable that is. So it's interesting to see them. And they've got a talent inclusion advisory group that's actioning all the proposals. So there is some action on those levels, but we would love to see it embedded further. I don't know if Sam or Lee, just we missed Nicola's question, but I think it's a really interesting one. Does anyone want to go back to that question? Sam?
So
Yeah.
particular topics or groups that this method is most impactful for?
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think pretty much anywhere there's a problem, that think this can be used, obviously with the right approach. If it's trauma informed, if the project is if it's designed in a way that really supports whatever the participants who have been affected by whatever the topic is. I worked on a project in Trafford on women's experience of public safety, and sexual harassment. And even though obviously that was a real heavy topic, that was one of the, I think it was the most transformational project I've been a part of in terms of the policy change that came from it, and the confidence that grew in people, as including myself as well. So my answer is I don't think there's any specific topic that works best. I think they all should.
That's great. And I agree. And I think this linked also to Susie's question, and we're going to close soon because I understand that people often have back-to-back meetings about any ethical challenges working with young people in particular. So we obviously had a safeguarding lead in the room with us, and we had a more complex ethics approval process. But I think there was not a specific, and we also had people with disabilities in the group as well, and all from diverse backgrounds. But we didn't encounter any specific ethical challenge, but we were very aware of the importance of ethics from ethical logistics, making sure there was a good space, access to food, and clarity about communication. I don't know if you want to add anything specifically about the facilitation, Sam and Lee.
I don't know. I mean, I hope I'm not naive. I don't think we encountered any ethical challenges. I guess with the facilitation, it's just being really really tuned into the group that you're with and what their needs are in that moment, because you might have just done a really great rehearsal, 2 hours, and you've created loads of scenes about all these problems, and then everyone might be really exhausted, and then it's just about being in tune and realizing, okay, we need to maybe tone this down or go a bit cooler on this, or lighter on this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And slowing down when we need to slow down, right?
Yeah.
But also always try to end on a positive note. And so there was our approach to always finish with a fantastic game facilitated by Sam and Lee, because we were tackling like really serious stuff. But we really wanted to keep a lot of joy and fun throughout. And so it was important to have these moments of relief and fun and space for connection among the young people as well. And yes, there's a comment from Lee. Topics are almost limitless. It comes down to the desire of the group and what they think needs to be changed. And the same about reading the room and being attentive to group needs. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. We could have many other hours of discussion about legislative theatre. I think legislative theatre is a really powerful method. We're experimenting with a range of arts-based and creative methods. I don't think none of us is a purist, right? So it's not just one method. We like the ecosystem, the ecology, and but I think there is a space for arts-based and creative methods in terms of bringing fun and also emotions into discourses of democracies and spaces of democracy, which are often too boring and serious, and they inevitably alienate certain groups. So yes, I've learned a lot from working with Sam and Lee and Katie. So this has been a fantastic project that continues, and I think the hard part of chasing the policymakers will continue for many months. But there is goodwill. So yeah, we are positive. I don't know if you want to add one last thought, Sam, Lee, and Katie, and then we can close.
Just thank you, everybody. We're excited to talk.
Thank you.
About it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. And we are going to share the link of the video if you want to watch it again or share it. And we'll keep you posted, and you can follow implementation of proposals on our policy tracker online. So help us monitor these policymakers. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.